Hi guys, welcome to another Facehammer video. In this video I'm going to be talking all about the matched play guide, which is released on the weekend. I know it's been covered by other people. I wanted to talk about my thoughts on it, and I'll tie it in a little bit into sort of meta and armies. I did do a tier list, which is only the official factions, so no legacy. Which you can check out where I talk about some of the things that are in here. I'm also going to talk about Facehammer GT, which elements of this I'm going to use at my event, and what I think competitive events going forward will use. I actually think the match play guide does a lot to balance out disparities between play in different armies, and I really like the customizable nature of like the bolt-ons of which extra rules do you want to use, and the guidance on scenarios that says use this, use that. So I don't want the show to be too dry because I know it's just a lot of rules, but I want to just talk about it from a competitive play point of view, what I think is good and what I think will help in a tournament to force people to balance their armies out. So I think we'll see a lot of these rules come in. So let's get into the show. So the book itself has some in preamble about what it is about and what match play is, and then there's some stuff about being on time, you know, being courteous, being all the kind of like the etiquette stuff. I would say if you're new to events, or even if you go to the events, I think it's worth having a read to understand, this sort of stuff's very important. Because when you play a game, it's a social contract. Both people, it's kind of enjoyment from both players is kind of a thing. It's not just about winning the game. So I think though that's both players' objective, you still want to have a good experience whilst you're at the table. So I would say it's important to read this. And some of this stuff is kind of like game etiquette, like roll your dice where your opponent can see them, don't sweep them up, make sure you re-roll anything that's cocked, go through your army list, don't like give people gotchas, which you don't get a lot in Old World anyway once you're experienced, because it's not like other games where there's loads of special rules on each unit. They're in the book, so most of the stuff's open information like magic items and things, so it's quite good, but it's worth having a read through. And there's also some stuff about organising an event, how you do rounds, what a spare player is, conduct, all that kind of stuff. And there's a scoring matrix. So if you've not run an event before, you can use. I would say it's good to read through that because it gives you an idea of how to run your event and how to do it, and it kind of gives you a template. But I would say you don't have to use all of this, so you can kind of like pick and choose as an event organizer. And sometimes it's good to customize your event slightly to, have the event you want to play in. And when I got into running events with South Coast GT with Dan Heenan and Wayne Kemp back in early 2000s, we always aimed it at the reason we did it is because the events weren't really giving us the experience we wanted. We weren't getting the competitive kind of tournament we wanted to go to in the community. So we decided to run an event that we wanted to be in, which was mostly gaming related, but there was other stuff around the edges, but it was mostly game score. It was quite unusual at the time because there was the WPS, the Warhammer Player Society, for people who are old enough to remember, pack, which had a lot of extra gumph in it and a lot of soft scores and things like that. And we were like, we wanted to sort of balance the game and get into just competitive play. And really the South Coast GT pack, every year we evolved it. It was used internationally, it was used in events all over the country. Eventually it almost became a standard. There were some other great systems like the Beyond score system from Sweden, which I know that Tom adopted for some of his events. And obviously the ETC had its own rules and committee. And I think that where I'm going with this point is that if you're running an event, run an event you want to play in, and that's kind of what I would pitch at. Bear in mind that you can't please everyone. You just need to make sure you please enough that your event doesn't cost you money, because they can be expensive to run on, and especially when you're starting out. If anyone is doing an event in the UK, wants me to shout out on the podcast, doesn't cost anything, just let me know. I'll try and shout it out. Okay, if you want me to promote it, whatever, I don't mind. Post it in the Discord, I don't care. It's just I'd rather know about the events and be able to get people going to old world events. It's not about making money out of it for me. I just want to make sure that if you are going to start doing events and you want people to come, then let me know. I can promote it. There's other Discords. The Close Order Discord's a good place, so you can go in there. There's an announcement channel. So I think there's an events channel in there. So I might need to spend a bit of time on my Discord because it's a bit out of date, to be honest. It's still set up from the days of Age of Sigmar, but I do post announcements of shows in there, but that's about it, really. So anyway, tournament scoring. So people who are around back in the day remember the 20-0 system. You might see people talk about 20-0. And what that means is that the margin of victory gives you more or less points. So then those 20 points are distributed between the two players. Similar thing in here, but it's 6 points, which is fine. It works the same, really, whether it's 6 or 20. And then you've just, it doesn't really matter. It's the same difference. And these kind of become your score. So there's a chart in here. So if we say most events are sit around here. So if you beat someone by, 1,401 points, that's a crushing victory. I think the R stands for resounding victory, although they're my initials, which is interesting. And then marginal victory, so you got to beat someone by 300 to get a marginal. Up to 300's a draw. So that's quite a big draw window. That's quite a big pot of points for a draw where both people get free, so interesting. But I think with the scenarios, there's extra ways to score little points to tip you over. There are tiebreakers in here, victory points, which is it's okay, but it's a bit of a crude method. And then they say VP1 for secondary objectives. I don't know if the software that's out there will allow us to record that effectively. And then it's enemy general slain. I mean, to be honest, I like strength for schedule. If you're using like BCP or some other tournament software out there like Longshanks, you may not have these options. So it depends on if they implement them. So I would say that actually, I'm not really sure. There's quite a fun, the enemy general slain is quite a fun thing to track. For like a secondary prize. So if what I find is good at events, if you try and have like the main like first, second, third, but then also have like painting awards, sports awards, but also you can do stuff like most bloodthirsty, most VP scored, head taker, most generals killed. I'm probably going to do something like that at South Coast, Facehammer. So I would do basically that. Everyone records when they kill a general, and then I might do like the standards captured as well. So it's if you record those, it's like a mini score, and I'll probably have to keep a spreadsheet for that. But I'm not sure the event will be like more than like 40 people, so it gives me some extra awards I can give out, which and you can play for those. If you lose a couple of games, you can still play for those. So you might lose half your games, but if you kill generals and capture loads of standards, then you're gonna be like, well, cool, because I'm getting those other awards that I can compete for, and that's why those things are good. In terms of separators, I'm not really a big fan of these. I don't think they're good separators. I think I'd rather do it on but that kind of is secret missions, but I'd rather do it as in like where you've got the secret missions, like if you succeeded in the mission, yes or no is a point, rather than did you deny theirs, yes or no is another one. But then I find that if the missions are secret, it's difficult to do. You kind of have to play them open in that case, and we've done that before where you both have, everyone's got a section of like 10 or 12 missions, and you play them open and you can use them once. You put them face down, flip them up, basically. And then you're going to try and stop theirs and get yours, and that gets you 2 points if you do both. If you both get yours or both deny, you get one each. And if you don't, so it's basically 2 points distribution between those four things. So Yeah, I don't know. It's okay. So it says in here that further tie breaks can be used at the organizer's discretion. So there you go, favorite opponent votes, secret objectives. That's what I was just talking about, basically. But you just need to make sure that's clear in the pack, how you do it. So I think these, again, it's just guidelines. You don't have to take it exact. So, and then it talks about pairings and spare players and if someone concedes. This stuff's all really good as a go-to if you don't know what to do in that situation, because we're in an event for the first time. People play games and then stuff will happen that you haven't thought about, or if you're not experienced as well, like you'll go, what do I do in that situation? And then it's, I think it's quite a nice baseline if you're interested in running events and you haven't done much of it. So the important thing, and really the most important thing about running an event, is that people have paid to be there, is to try not to like dictate too much the like your power. It's about making decisions for the benefit of the event integrity as a whole. You know, how does it cater to a good atmosphere? But don't get bullied by people who are taking the piss, basically, because people will try things on. But just be like, well, if I was another player in the event, how would I feel about it? Like, try and put yourselves in the shoes of the attendees. If you were, and that's why I said about the beginning, like, run an event you want to go to. So if you imagine you're a player at the event, how would you feel about it if that happened? And try and come to a level which makes, you know, the event feel good. So I think it can be difficult, especially if you've got a situation where someone will end up with an illegal list halfway through and you haven't covered that in your pack. What you do, you know, if there's some deliberate time wasting or something like that, so you need to have little mechanisms in your pack at your discretion, or explicit what happens in those circumstances. So just be aware of those things. A lot of these things as well, they're not intentional, they just kind of happen. And sometimes in the heat of the moment, things happen and you just have to kind of like play it by ear. So it's not as scary as it sounds, so I won't worry too much. So this is where we get the first kind of like proper restrictions for army composition. Now, again, you can choose, like, do you want to play open, which is just do what you want, or grand melee or combined arms. I think most events will use both of these, probably with additional restrictions, if I'm honest. Because you can still do a lot of really abusive things. And I think that, you know, you've got to be a bit careful. The reason that I like adding extras is because if someone's got like a list that does really well and it's kind of the metas have got a bit stale, then you changing those boundaries means that they have to create or come up with a new idea. And that means that you're forcing the players to adjust. And if they don't adjust, then you'll weed out the kind of the good players from the bad players a little bit. And so I think those decision points are good if you're doing that. But grand melee, basically, and you probably all know this already, is 25% of your army's total on a single character or unit. So that means you can't do Death Stars as well. You still can, but, you know, because you can still do characters and units and put the characters in the units. But you can, you know, it does restrict a few things. I think because it's 25%, you know, that does hurt things like the Chaos Dragon Lord, but then there's other things you can do now. So it takes the edge off some things which are a bit, you know, like point denial. But you can still do like a massive unit of like Longbeards with, you know, Fang, BSB and a Lord in it, and it's not getting anywhere, not getting shifted. It says you can include any number of level 1 or 2 wizards, but only include 0 to 1 level 3 wizard per 1,000 points, and 0 to 1 level 4 per 2,000 points. So that does mean at 2,000 points you could have 2 level 3s and a level 4, right? That's how I read that. I think that's like not a restriction, especially since it changes to magic, that a level 3, the only difference is you don't know a spell, but the casting effectiveness is the same as a level 4. So it's not really a restriction. I know like Mortuary Cult players might be like, oh, I've got 2 level 4s, but just make one a level 3. It doesn't really change anything, does it? You get one less spell. Okay, whoop-de-doo. You know, you can take magic items to guarantee the spell you need if you're worried about that. I think I personally would probably adjust that and just say that this is 0 to 1 level 3 or 4 wizard per 2,000 points, so you are restricted to 2. Not that I'm not even sure that I think it's a bit of a false economy to have more than 2, but we don't know with Cafe with the Shigengan Lords if that's a thing, but then they can be level 2, so it doesn't really matter. I don't know. I'm not sure this is really a restriction or even necessary. The top one for sure is good. This one really is the most important restriction. And this is limiting the type of unit. So 0 to 3 for characters, 0 to 4 for core, 0 to 3 for special, 0 to 2 for rare and mercenary. So it means you can't spam, because I think technically, you can take like 6 cannons if you really wanted to in Empire or Dwarfs. Because it gets 0 to 3 war machines per 1,000 points, and you could take 6 cannons at 2,000 points. Not that anyone's got 600 points for 6 cannons, because you just need other things in the list. But you could, I think there's a diminishing returns once you get above 3, but there you go. Obviously this does affect gyrocopters, but the thing about gyrocopters, you can put them in units, but it does stop you having like 11 individual gyrocopters. So it's still a nerf in a way, because if you charge or make a unit flee or debuff it or charge it, obviously they're a bit more unwieldy being big. And with the thing about skirmishes, you need to be able to move into base contact and stuff. So you could do some funky things like pop your no-fly banner, charge one of the gyros. They've got to get into combat. They can't. Then you've got a 1-inch move. They all die. So, stuff like that. So I think it does give them a lot of weakness. I know that gyrocopter spam is pretty egregious. You could do it with Expeditionary Force if you take like 4 units of scouts, 2 in each. So that's 8. Then you could take 3 individual. You could even take 3 2s as well. So you could take another sort of 6. So you've got like 14 gyrocopters. The only thing about that is you've got 7 units of gyrocopters, and the problem with the Expeditionary Force, you just don't have access to those long beards, the iron breakers, the hammerers, all that sort of stuff. Which I know people think, you've got dwarf warriors, but you can't even have a king. So you could put a Thane on shield bearers, but it's not quite the same, especially with the restriction in how many runes you can have. I'm specifically talking about dwarf because my tier list has got a lot of comments, and someone thinks dwarfs are S tier. And I was looking through this and I was thinking I might have put them too low because I think they're good in the scenarios. But then again, the scoring here doesn't help them. This like trying to beat someone by 300 points for a draw, just a minor win, and trying to get what do you need for a resounding victory at 2,000 points, like 750. That's quite a lot. Difference that is. So, that's quite a big win for dwarfs because they don't chase points very well. So, I do think they're going to suffer over an event where that's the scoring because you're not going to get those big wins. I still think they might not lose a game, but they might not podium just because other people that have lost games have just scored 6, 6, 6, and you've got 4, 3, 5, and then it just doesn't. It's not going to catch them. Time will tell. It'd be nice if dwarves could compete, and I think the scenarios and the extras, if they're being used, that really helps dwarves. But anyway, I'm just off a side tangent now, but I'm just saying that this restriction is quite a good one. Obviously, it does say that unless a unit or character already restricted in some way, so like that, because sometimes it might say like 0 to 1 per 1,000, and obviously, I can have 3 now. No, you still follow those restrictions. So, it talks about detachments and not counting and things like that. This rule of 3 is a little bit extended, is what was used in a lot of events anyway. Certainly ones I went to, even official GW ones. So these two together, I think, are good restrictions. I think there could be more if we start seeing stuff that's prevalent and very powerful. I'm sure GW could even errata or add extra ones that if people wanted to. So you got terrain set up. It's quite interesting. It tells you how much terrain should be on the table. It's got some sizes, how many points they count as, how you place terrain. I mean, I like to have terrain set up or maps, and then people come along and the terrain's already there. At Facehammer GT, the tables will be set up, and I'll try to have the 6 pieces, because basically you take the edge, and then if it's humongous, I'll take it off. I normally make labels as well, like impassable, blah blah blah, and put them on. I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory with Old World, but yeah, I'll normally put labels down for things like that. And again, it talks about scattering. Now, I found the only problem with scattering, because there is a restriction, you can't put stuff within like 3 inches of another terrain, but scattering things kind of go all over the place. You end up with really weird boards. I'm not a fan of scattered dice moving terrain. I think it's like, it does say the loser, it says chooses, so it's not even optional. So I just don't like the scatter mechanic. I think if you set a table up semi-symmetrically and fair, and then you just roll off, it's fine. For table sides. So I'm not really a big fan of scattered terrain, because you can end up really weird stuff where stuff like 3 pieces are bunched up in one area and then there's a massive open space, and it just doesn't really work. Especially when you've got no minimum distance. I think 6 inches should be the minimum distance, because most units are 5 inches wide, 6 inches wide. I think it's just, you need that space to be able to maneuver through. I mean, I know terrain's not as punishing as it used to be. I do quite like open order for that reason, that you don't care too much about moving through difficult terrain. But yeah, anyway. Scenarios. So it's quite good because it talks about alternate units, and then the first turn. It does say the winner chooses who will take the first turn, rather than at the moment it's you roll off and you do go first. So this is a choice now, and you get the +1s. That's kind of how I'm used to playing. So that'll be good if that's standard. And then in terms of game length, you've got obviously fixed term. Most games run for 6 rounds, and that's standard. You've got random game length. No one really likes that. I think it's fine, but it doesn't always work at a tournament setting. The breakpoint's interesting. I like the breakpoint as an extra VP mechanic. I don't really like it as deciding whether the game finishes or not, because it's all based on unit strength. It used to be banners and generals and BSBs. It counted as like your general was 1, your BSB was 2, or your general was 3, and your BSB was 2, and banners were 1. And if you got below like 4, you were broken. So you had to kind of like have banners in the list. And yeah, but that's, and then time limit, which is normally where people have a restriction, where you've got the 2, the fixed turn and the time limit, and basically most tournaments would be 2.5 hours, 3 hours, maybe 2 hours is a bit of a push, but Old World does play faster than AOS, I found, once you know what you're doing. Then you got victory points. So obviously you score points. And then they talk about dead or fled, and then this has got the unit strength and the wounds. None of this is really that exciting. The general, I think this has changed as trophies. I think it was 25 for a banner, it might have been 50. But every standard is 50 points, and then the battle standard is another 50. I think it is 50 actually. I don't remember, but it might be 25 at the moment. Special features and breaking the enemy. If breakpoints being used, it awards you a bonus of 500 victory points. So that's quite an interesting mechanic. But what that will do, that will make armies that smash even better. So, because they're more likely to get big wins. And it's going to make the disparity between an average player and a strong player bigger, in terms of like, if someone has luck of the draw and gets easier opponents or matchups, and they get big wins, they're going to be very difficult to catch. So it kind of compounds that problem. So I don't really like that level of VP being added. That's quite a lot. I do also think that that's a big swing if you break someone. It does encourage people to, because it is unit strength, so it does encourage people to try and take more units or more bodies. So maybe that's another side effect of that you're like, well, actually, I want a big unit then, because if you don't kill that unit, you don't break me. So, I want to have that in my list. So it's interesting. I'm not sure about that. I think maybe to start with it won't be used, but it might be an interesting mechanic to use. I'd probably just use it in maybe a scenario or something like that, or breakpoint to be used as a victory point condition, just in like a scenario, or like, you know, just as a tie break, as something you record but it doesn't score you extra VPs. I don't know, but that's quite significant. So we've got some scenarios, and essentially, you know, they're not that exciting, but what they do is they have special rules and secondaries. So this is almost your pitched battle, and it says you may use baggage train, special features, domination, and strategic locations. So basically, you can have objective markers like here and here, or the 3 across the middle, or the 4 diamond, or you can have the baggage train or the feature in the middle of the table. So effectively, it's like, do what you want with it. So it's a standard pitch battle that you just score points for killing. And then I'll talk about these secondaries in a minute. They're quite cool though. Then you've got King of the Hill, and in this one, it's basically saying that, you know, you can't vanguard. So there's a restriction on stuff. So some say you can't ambush, you can't vanguard, you know, things like that. So I know in AOS there was one of these that you can't use your setups. It really screwed like Deepkin and Stormcast. So this one was saying that the player who controls the hill at the end of each turn scores 100 victory points. And this is what I was talking about with dwarfs. So if you're playing King of the Hill and your dwarf unit, you know, you're 10 inches from your deployment zone to the middle of the hill, your dwarf unit's movement free. So you need to be in marching column with a Bugman's cart, then you're going 12 inches. You could literally march your unit onto the hill turn 1 there. And even if you're not in like a ranked formation, that's going to be extremely difficult to shift, because if it's, you know, if it's that, because you can then plonk your gyros, you know, to redirect any charge, then it gives you a turn to readdress your ranks. If you take the hill, and this going first, and this might be a bit too much of an advantage. If you take the hill, it's going to rack up those points over the game. But again, you've got things like making people flee, making people pursue, you know, anything like that. So there's lots of ways to maneuver people around. Even like things like wind blast might become useful. But you need to basically a core unit within 9 of the center that has unit strength of 10 or more, not fleeing, not stupid. And if 2 or more eligible units within 9 are, the closest unit controls it. If 2 or more are equally close, highest unit strength. So it's quite an interesting setup. It says you can use baggage train or special features secondary. So the special feature, I think, gives you like a buff if you're on this, but baggage train would be useful because you have to have another objective you have to hold on to, so you can't just like blob your army on the middle. I quite like the baggage train actually, because when I first saw it, I was getting hives thinking of the messenger scenarios from the Warhammer Player Society pack, which I used to hate. So yeah. And we got drawn battle lines, and it says each player rolls a dice. If either player rolls a 1, both players must choose a single unit, infantry or cavalry, to be held in reserve. So it's a little bit different for meeting engagement, because you don't just roll for every unit, and on a 1 you're fucked. If you roll lots of 1s, then you're like, oh, for fuck's sake, that's my like member character that goes at units off and the unit's on, so what do I do? It really screws some armies. So, and it says in here that, and what I like about that is you could have a unit in your army that's like, I don't care if it's late, you know, put your 10 rangers in your dwarf army, so you don't have to put your iron breakers or your longbeards in reserve, you know, something like that, whatever. So the player that basically wins the roll, and then you set up all that kind of jank. And it does say any character that can join a unit can be held in reserve, but then they can join a unit. So you could put your unit in reserve of your characters in it if you wanted to do some point denial. I don't know, it might work. You could use that as point denial. You could literally have a big block that you just don't bring on, because you're like, I'm going to lose the block, it's going to die. it's not going to give me anything in the game. I'm just going to hold it off the table. I don't need it on the table. So you could do that. This is a scenario must include strategic location free. So that means you will have objectives, and may include domination and or baggage train. So domination is table quarters, basically, which used to be a thing in the normal rules back in the day. Then we've got close quarters, which again is I'm not sure why it's called close quarters when you're still the same distance away. Other than you've got a little bit at the side you can't set up in. And then it says in here, you roll off. It's, you've got options for game length, bottleneck, it's narrow mountain pass. So basically it's saying that the short edges are impassable terrain, so no units, including fleeing or reserves, can leave or enter. And that's it, fear or fly. And it must include strategic locations too, may include domination. So it's okay. I don't really see this being much of a big deal. So yeah, it's okay. It's only like a little shift really. Chance encounter. So this is quite interesting. So you've got an 18-inch circle in the middle, and then you essentially roll off, and you basically pick a deployment zone, and the person uses the one opposite. So it's this way and this way, but you're only 18 inches away from each other. But it does give you a lot of depth. So if you've got like lots of long range war machines, you can put them like here and here, and then you can kind of like, put your combat stuff up front. So you can really kind of give you some wiggle room. And it doesn't have any special rules. It says that it must include the special feature and may include domination and baggage train. So there will be a feature in the middle for points, I believe. Then encirclement. So again, you've got these deployment zones with a foot on either side. So it's almost like, slightly offset. And then it says it has no special rules, but must include strategic location 4, secondary, and may include baggage train and or special features. So again, it's optional, but the locations is not optional. So the secondary objectives are explained here. In the baggage train, it's got a lot of rules, but essentially the idea is you have a train that you can either capture or destroy, and they occupy a 60 by 100 mil base, and they say it should be a miniature diorama. It says they're dangerous terrain for purposes of movement, ignored for line of sight. So I think you could stand on them, maybe not, I don't know. It doesn't say impassable. I mean, I would probably say you can't stand on them, because if it's a miniature diorama, how are you going to do that? And basically it says they're set up, once you've picked sides, you set them up in your deployment zone, can't be within edge, can't be in a terrain feature. Then to control it, you need a unit within 6, unit strength 10 or more, not fleeing, not stupid. And if 2 or more eligible, it's the closest. However, if they're equally close, it's contested. No one controls it. So I think having it as impassable, you're in base contact, is probably the best way to go. I mean, it might cause some problems with people blocking off movement with it. That's the only other thing. So, and you can destroy it by moving onto it. So you might better catch people out with drilled and marching column. I don't know, but basically, once you're in, it says in base contact. So I'm assuming you can't move into it, but if you flee through it, it's dangerous. Basically, I don't know. It might need a little bit of clarity. So you go into base contact with it, you start destroying it, and then basically, while you're in base contact, you can't shoot, can only cast spells with combat or self. And then basically, if the start of your next turn, you've still got unit strength for 5, you're not in combat, you're not fleeing, it's removed from play. And then you score the victory points at the end. So I quite like the baggage train. I think especially good in a scenario where there's something in the middle or there's only a couple of objectives. It gives you something else to think about. I would probably put some restriction on not putting it near an objective either, but, that's me. Because obviously you just put it on top of an objective and you're getting a 2 for 1. So you've got a special feature. So some sort of terrain feature, no more than 6 inches wide. They're impassable terrain, no line of sight can be drawn through them. You place it up in basically center of the battlefield, so I think it's in the middle. It's in the center. It doesn't scatter. And it's basically the same again. It's controlled if during the start of turn subphase, a core unit is within 6, has a unit strength of 10 or more, is not fleeing, not stupid. And if 2 or more units are eligible, the closest unit controls it. If 2 or more eligible units are equally close, the unit with the high unit strength controls it. However, if 2 or more eligible units are equally close to a special feature and both have the same unit strength, it's contested. So this really helps armies that have reliably not going to move cheap numerous infantry. So Tomb King skeletons with shield wall will be amazing at holding this, because basically they ain't backing up because you got shield wall. I mean, you can just stand a model behind the unit if you don't want it to back up. Then you can heal them. They don't run away. They don't panic. They don't get terrored. So yes, they're skeletons, so they can get easily chewed up. But if they're stood behind impassable terrain, you're not going to be able to get that much to bear on them. So I think unit armies that can take core infantry, which hit or can fight or can survive, your Chaos Warriors, your Jade Warriors, Knights of the Realm on foot are a good example, or even just a massive unit of Man-at-Arms, that you just put behind it and you put Lancers on either side and Peg Knights. These kind of armies are going to have a big advantage because you've got a unit that can basically sit on this and be like, yeah, I'm not moving. It's important they have to be core. So armies, that's why I think armies that can take good infantry in their core or move them to the core slot through character selection or whatever would be in a good position. And basically the victory points, it gives you 200 at the end of the battle. So it's not a big score. It's like, yeah, it's 200 points, but that doesn't even change a draw to if you've got no victory points, it's not going to give you a win, because it's 300 points for a win. So it's not that much of a big deal. And also you've got these properties where you roll for whoever's controlling it, and you either get like magic resistance 3, hatred, or unbreakable. I mean, these rules are just like amazing for anyone. So like, especially unbreakable, it's just really, you're not moving. So I'm not a big fan of that. I don't think that needs to be in the game. I think I would just not use that chart because that dice roll is so random and it could have such a big impact that I just don't really like it. So that's my 2 cents on that anyway. Domination. So basically this is controlling table quarters. It's unit strength of their models that's completely within each quarter. I would also probably clarify that I would do the majority, where the majority of the model is in. So if you've got like a model that's on 150 mil by 100 base, and like one little corner of it is in the other quarter, I wouldn't say, oh, that doesn't count as either quarter because it's not wholly in either. And it's like, yeah, but that's kind of pointless. So it's got to be in one of them. It can't not exist in reality. So I think the wording on that should be changed, because a model might not be completely within a quarter, but I think you should just be in the one that you've got the majority, and if you're equidistant, you randomize it so there's not like shenanigans where you stand exactly halfway and can pick and choose. And then it says for each quarter of the battlefield the player controls, they get 100 VPs. It says the unit strength for the models controlling a quarter is more than twice the enemy, get an extra 50. And if it's uncontested, i.e. their opponent has unit strength of 0, then another 100. So actually, this is quite a lot of points. Now, armies like Wood Elves, Beastmen are going to be amazing at this because they can just run around and they're fast. You can take numerous units. I know they're elite. I don't know, they're expensive, but like, dryads, you just have a couple units that just stand around, and then you can just move back and forwards. It's like, it's really good. It's at the end of the game, but the point is that armies that have lots of these units, and that's why, like, in a dwarf army, I might want to take 15 miners, you know what I mean, like with a steam drill. I just want to turn up late in the game, stand in the quarter. There's some secondaries that help with that as well. Scouts are good. You can get in a position and just stay in the position. So I think this is actually quite a cool secondary to have. Probably wouldn't want it in every mission, because I wouldn't want people to hone their list completely for this. But I think in some missions that's going to be a big difference. Like, playing against those kind of numerous armies, or like, or even orcs and goblins with lots of wolf riders, or chaos with Marauder having dogs. It's pain in the ass getting those units sometimes if they're not playing the game with them and they're just running around and hiding. You're going to have a hard job getting those, and they already getting more points back than they cost. Particularly if you've got ways to chip off and kill those weaker units. Going second might actually be a good thing in that scenario as well, because you've got the last turn and they can't react to it. So you could literally just maneuver and be like, well, now I'm majority in this one, or not this one. So I want to be, like this. So I'm going to score more points. If I do it this way, I'll score less points. So where you move your units in the last turn might be a big thing, or what you shoot at, or what you use a magic missile on. So I think if you're playing an army that's slow, then what you want to do is get into the middle of the table, so you've got a little bit of agency about which quarters you're going to be ended up. At least aim to be roughly in the middle of the table, about turn 4, because at least that gives you a shortest distance to jump into each quarter. But obviously that does make hunting them if they're at the edges hard. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I like that one. It does kind of promote a little bit of negative play in terms of not fighting and not doing this, but sometimes that's the only way to beat armies. If you can't fight them, then what else can you do? Like you if you physically can't beat them up in combat, or you don't have the tools, it's like the Chaos Dragon was a bit like that. It's like, well, you can't fight the thing, you can't really kill it, so all you've got to do is avoid it and try and get points elsewhere. So that's another mechanism to get points elsewhere. So I think that's good. It's pretty cool. You've got strategic locations, basically objectives. They say they should be represented by a miniature diorama on a 40mm base. They're decoration, so I think that means you just move over them. They don't really, they're just a thing, like a marker. And they could represent, and there's some flavor text. I won't use the word fluff. So it says in here that can never be within 3 of a terrain feature or straddling a low linear obstacle. If necessary, move the terrain by the smallest amount possible to allow it to be placed. So it means there's no terrain around it. So that's pretty good. And it says that at the end of each turn, an objective marker can be controlled by a single core unit within 6 that is unit strength for 10 or more. Is not fleeing, is not stupid. And again, 2 or more eligible are within 6. It's the closest. If 2 or more eligible are equally close, the higher unit strength controls it. So if you've got the same, it's contested. And then you get 30 VPs at the end of each player's turn. So if you've got like 3 locations and you're getting 30 points, that's 90 points per turn. That's 180 points per round, 6 rounds. You certainly see that this could be a massive score if you've got units that are really, really hard that can just, make a stand on them and go, come get me. Like, this is why I think infantry blocks now are going to be a staple in most lists. You're going to have one block, a block of Chaos Warriors, a block of Knights of the Realm, or a big block of Man-at-Arms, or a big block of Skeletons, or Tomb Guard. Core units, which are infantry, which are hard. Longbeards are great. Dwarf Warriors are good. Lothern Sea Guard. You might take, I know you could use cavalry as well, but big unit of Silver Helms, that's equally as good. At least they're fast, so you can get there quickly, and they could probably clear something off if it's not that good. But these kind of things, like, they're going to be worth their weight in gold And there's going to be a bit of a mini game dropping units below unit strength 10, because if you drop them below unit strength 10, they're not going to capture it. So you can just go, well, I'll shoot off a couple. Okay, they're no longer big enough to hold it, so it's fine, and then, but obviously you've got to do that quickly because you score points as you rack through. I think this is one of the most interesting things, because it doesn't, killing the army is still the objective, like winning the battlefield is still the objective. It doesn't change it into the fighting doesn't matter. All we're doing now is standing on things to get points. There's a difference to like Age of Sigmar, where the only points for winning the game come from objectives and these battle tactics. Whereas you've still got to get victory points by killing stuff. This just adds a little bit more onto your score, which could tip you into a different bracket or move it to a draw. So actually, I quite like this because it's using the same points mechanism. So actually, I much prefer this because at least the gaming in essence hasn't changed from we're trying to win the field of battle, we're trying to kill the enemy. That it's a war game. That's what war games should be about. It's so. I quite like that. We're not playing sports, it's not dodgeball. So we've got, we're definitely not playing sports with our physiques generally. I speak for myself in that case. So you've got the objectives, so strategic locations 2, so basically 2 objectives like this, and then 3 is 3 across the middle, and then 4 is the 4 like this. So obviously, the more objectives, the more points are available. This one is kind of, it almost encourages you to kind of like push forward and try and hold. And what I do like about this, it will encourage fighting. It will encourage people to engage. So that's almost the counter to the negative play, because you have to be proactive. Because, if you've got something like, table quarters and you've got 3 blocks like on here and they all go in second, so they might have got up here, but then you go, I can fight them off, so I can just move up in front of them and go charge me then. And then they're not going to charge me. I'll charge them, get them off. Then it's like at the end of the game, you're like, well, I've got the quarters as well, so let's outscore you. I mean, there's even stuff like you can put units in quite wide, so it shuts down the possibility of people getting behind you and things like that. And again, it then also makes things like fast cavalry, you take a unit of 15 Marauder Horsemen or something, like that's unit strength, 30, and they're core and they're fast and they've got you could be skirmish, you could be open order, they can move quickly, it's like it's like I've got to kill. They're not hard to kill, but they're hard to pin down. But then like magic missiles would be good. So it's like, okay, so I need to have little shoot in and things like that to chip things off. So yeah, I think it makes the game a lot more interesting, I think. So I like these. Rules for doubles. So I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. This is the same rules that I think are in the Warhammer World Pack. So essentially what they do is you take a primary force and then a secondary force. So this is quite complicated. It took me a while reading it to understand. So every muster list, so the Grand Armies, have got an allies section. Armies of Infamy do not have an allies section. So if you play Exiles, Bretonnian Exiles, that doesn't have an allies section. But if you play Bretonnian Grand Army, that can have an allied section of Exiles, if that makes sense. So what you do is you pick an army, and what we're doing is Grand Army Dwarfs. Then I'm playing Expeditionary Force. That's the allied army. So it basically, you treat the opponent's your allies' partner's army as an allied contingent. So essentially what happens here, you're normally trusted, but sometimes you could be uneasy. So if you take like Tomb King's Grand Army, you could have like allies of, I don't know, Orcs and Goblins. I don't know if that's an option, but Orcs and Goblins as suspicious, for example. Or is what my friend's doing, Empire with suspicious Wood Elves. So they're the secondary army. And what that means is that you have some negatives to your leadership and stuff if you're within range, I think 6 inches. But you can't use your stuff on each other. So like if he's got a BSB, I can't use that to reroll mine, even if I'm playing the same army. Like he's dwarfs on dwarfs, it doesn't matter. And like my general doesn't give my leadership to his army, stuff like that. So that is it's basically how it works. The other thing is it's one list, right, with an allied contingent. So that still follows the restrictions of magic items and things like that, because you can't duplicate in the two armies, because you're writing it as a list with an allied contingent. So it's still one list. So you can't duplicate special characters, magic items, things like that. So with like dwarfs, the runic items need to be different, even between the two armies, basically. And then there's some double scenarios. I don't have them in here because it's missing some of those. And it does talk about the king, but the secondary general is worth less points. So they're worth 50 points, not 100. And then the same with like the banners, they're worth like 25, for the BSB. So there's some differences in points depending if they're the primary or the secondary force. The Grand Army's always got to be the primary force. So Dean's got the primary force. He's got the general. His general, if he dies, he's worth 100. If my Burlock Damison dies, only worth 50, which is better for me because Burlock's pretty squishy. So there are some scenarios. I've only got the third one in here, but essentially they're the same in terms of like they're just set up for doubles. So hopefully the event in Warhammer World will use these, because I'd quite like to play these scenarios and things. I'm going to take my Bugman's cart just in case, because I think if we've got a baggage train I can use that. I'm not sure that they will play that because it's not been in the pack, because the pack came out before this. It's in the end of August, the event, so we'll see. And then we've got some rules on team events, and this is to do with like your army list, like how and then I'm not going to go through this because it's more of an advanced thing, and most team events will have their own rules. And then you've got how to do pairings, and then you basically have, it talks about rear guard and stuff like that. So I'm not going to go through all this because if you're into team events, then have a read. I mean, it's an advanced event, really. Team events, I don't think they're very beginner friendly. Not saying beginners can't go to them, but it adds another layer of strategy onto the game. So if you just want to have a laugh, then of course you can go. But I'll just say that it's another level of how you match up your players in your team against their team. So that's all it means. There are some additional rules like escalation, which I think your army gets bigger between rounds, which I don't think I've ever played one. I might have done one. So I know I used to play one event that had an army swap, which was the Bristol Brawl. So it was run by the Bristol Biggins, and that used to be down in it's in Frome. Anyway, somewhere around Bristol. And basically, what used to happen is in one of the games, you play your opponent's army, they play your army. So it was quite good. If you played a list that was like strong but needed play, you give it to your opponent and they don't know what they're doing with it. You can just then smash that up. So I used to quite enjoy the army swap. That was interesting. Then there's secret objectives. Now, secret objectives, it says when writing your list, you select which ones you want from the 12. Start of the game, you choose one, put it face down. You can only use one per game. And then when doing the victory points, you reveal it. I'm not a big fan of these. I think they're a bit random, and I don't like they're worth variable amounts. And some of them require you to count when you're doing them. So they're not going to be very secret, are they? And if you don't count, when you get to the end of the game, are you going to remember how many, like this one, how many times you dispelled an opponent's spell with a fated dispel? Like, actually quite difficult to remember. So now do you have to track this every game in case they play it or you play it? And then you have to check the same, like if this is done? Like you get to the end. Oh yeah, I did the 3 spells in turn 2. Did you? Yeah, I did. Definitely did. Did you? So this just means that because they're secret, they're quite difficult to track because they're things that happen during the game. Like this one you could track at the end. This one will be pretty obvious. Kill all the monsters, that's going to be obvious. Some are obvious, but some of that where you count things, it's like, I don't really like those. Like remembering that they failed a panic test because you shot them with the war machine, you'll remember because you're playing for it. But then they're going to go, "Did you? No, I didn't. That was from the unit you shot me with these, and I did it on that. And actually, no, it wasn't from." And it's like, it's almost like, and that's not too bad because you could, but then you don't want to tell them you've done it until the end of the game. So like, I don't know. Some of these are a bit random. I like the concept of secret objectives. I actually think they're better when you play them open, and they were different. I don't think some of these would. I'm not going to use these at Facehammer. I think as well, having to put them on your list as well, and then the admin of it is not worth the difference, because like sometimes you get a 75 VP, or you get more points for capturing banners, and it's like, yeah, but if I've captured 3 banners, I've probably wiped out 3 of their main units, because people don't put banners on little units. So I've just wiped out their 3 main blocks. I'm not losing that game, am I? So if I've got 3 standards and I get an extra 100 VP, does it matter? No, it just matters for tie breaking. I've smashed you more. Okay, fine, but that doesn't really add to the event. That doesn't change a close game to a win, and that's what I think secondaries, these missions should do. They should give you the points to tip you over the edge, to change it from a minor loss to a draw, or to a crushing. So I don't really think they achieve that, and I don't like the fact they're worth less. Some are worth less or more points, and I think they should all be worth the same. And they should be balanced around generic things, and you should play them open. That's how I used to do secondary missions. They were open, and then you picked, and everyone had access to the same set. And in a tournament, you had like 12 or 10, and you only played 6, or 5. So you had basically double what you needed to, and you could pick and choose, but then you could use them once. And that works okay. But they know what you're trying to achieve. And then you basically go, you get a point if you achieve it. They get a point if they stop you. And that's tournament points, not victory points. So I don't know if these are going to work in practice. I wouldn't mind playing under it. But again, I just think it adds a lot of admin and not a lot of benefit in terms of the event. As an organizer, it's a nightmare to track. Because have they used it more than once? Did they actually forget to do it? It's like, do I have to give out cards? I just no, don't want to do it. So I think it adds too much faff. And I think the other mission stuff's great. So all that stuff could be fine. But that's my feeling on secret objectives. But if you want to play them, play them. If I was picking them, then you'd have to choose for your list. I don't want Old World turning into Age of Sigmar, battle tactics and objectives, and killing doesn't matter, because for me that's not a war game. That's like I said, it's like playing basketball. Did you get 3 points or 2 points? It's like it's not. You're not actually trying to fight and win the field of battle. You're just trying to do random quirky hokey pokey things and stand on circles. It doesn't really give me the same feeling as a war game. So I think a combination of those two, of that giving you points towards the victory and killing gives you points towards the victory, means they're equally worth. So I like that. But these missions I'm not a fan of. Some of them are okay, but yeah, I just think they're way too random. What if you got this and you play against an immune psychology army? You're like, well, they're not going to panic, so I can't do it. So, what if they haven't got any monsters? What if and I know you say don't play that one in that mission, but you get to a point in the tournament where you don't have. And that's why I don't like having to restrict the number in your list. I mean, obviously there's a guideline, so you could change the rules for your TO, but I say I wouldn't use them as they're presented in this book. Like, as this, I wouldn't use them in my event. So I'm not saying that they can't be used in an effective way, but I just don't think how they're presented here is the best way. As a TO, I definitely wouldn't do that. I would change this mechanic in some way. And one of the biggest changes, I'd probably just say you can use any of them once, but you have access to all of them. You don't have to write on your list a restricted list, because at least then you can react a bit more to what your opponent's got, because if you write stuff in your list that's going to be affected by your opponent's army and you don't play against those things, then you can't do them, which is like you've immediately handicapped yourself through the random draw. So it's not like it's not a game mistake you've made, it's just luck of the draw, which I don't think should contribute that much. Anyway, that's the match play guide. I will cover this and say that I am really pleased that there is a match play guide. I think it's great for TOs, gives you a really good baseline to work from. I think it's fantastic for if you're playing games with friends to have a bit more structure to balance things out. I think it makes the game a little bit more interesting. The scenarios in the main rule book, most of them are not good for competitive play. Meeting engagement is the prime example. And I think the new meeting engagement, which I think is drawn battle lines, is a lot better. Because again, you can choose a unit. You're both affected by the same roll. So it's not like I get a unit off, you don't. It's like any of us rolls a 1, that happens. And I can put characters with the unit and I can choose when they come on. So it's not a roll. So I like that. I quite like the King of the Hill one. It's like Watchtower without the occupy and building jank. I think it definitely would benefit from baggage train at the same time. So I do think they're good. I mean, the scenarios I think are great. They don't like stop the game being about fighting a battle, but they do add a little bit of nuance and difference, which I think is enough, and without too much that it really hammers a certain list, which I think is always important when you write generic scenarios, that you don't want your game decided by random dice rolls before you deploy, or by a restriction on special rules that your army relies on because they designed a list that works around a thing and they take the mechanic away. Like if there's a scenario where all war machines can't shoot for the game and all missile weapons at -2, that only hurts dwarfs and empire. And it's like, well, why is that in the game? Like, so you're immediately losing a game that you know. So it's stuff like that. And there was stuff like that in Age of Sigmar in back in the day. Like, you can't use deep strike, or not deep strike, but the set up 9 away. You can't set up units later in the game. It has to be deployed. So it completely screwed Stormcast and Deepkin lists. And it was like, oh, it's a good balancer. It's like, well, it's not really, because it shouldn't be a thing you need to play, because that army doesn't have any other way to play. So it's not like it doesn't add tactical. It's like not moving the goalpost a little bit. It's like, over here and then there, and then it's like. So I think that's the good thing about these scenarios. They're not extreme. They're kind of a lot more, little bit of tweak, little bit of push and pull, but not like this way and that way. So that's always what you want with competitive play. You just want to move the margins a little bit. You want to just tweak it slightly, give the edge slightly to something else, or to certain lists, or to certain units. What I do like about this, it does encourage core units of high unit strength that can hold objectives. So, big box cavalry, infantry, I think it's really good. So, will you take 2 units of 5 Jade Lancers, or are you going to have 1 unit of 10? Because they can actually hold stuff and take casualties and still hold it. I think going forward, this is great for the game. And I think more things that encourage that is going to be really good, because it goes away from the MSU style little magic missile chips and dragon lists, which are so strong. With the FAQ and errata and this, combine that all together, I think the game's in a fantastic spot. I think competitive play now with Old World is going to be fantastic. So I would encourage anyone who hasn't got on board to get into Old World. I think it's a fantastic game. Obviously, I've been playing Warhammer since I was like 10. Which is over 30 years, basically. And I would say that this is the best version of a GW out the book Warhammer we've ever had for mass battle rank and flank games. I'm generally really happy with where the game's at. And I think the studio have done a fantastic job getting it to this point. So hopefully it will just go strength to strength going forward. and hopefully you guys can join me at Facehammer GT this year. It's in September 6th and 7th. Tickets on sale at Element Games. You can see the details on the website. I'll be updating the Facehammer pack in the next few days, and I will basically get that up on the site updated, and I will do a bit more promotion online to try and get some more tickets sold, and I will be doing some more content around. I'm going to go through every faction now that we've got this framework of the handbook. Now we've got the framework of the match play guide and the FAQ and errata. I want to do like faction deep dives. I will try and do some legacy content. I know there was a lot of comments on my tier list about lack of legacy. And that purely will probably come after Facehammer GT, because Facehammer allows legacy lists. So I'm really interested to go around the room and see how they're performing, look at the results come in, talk to players about the legacy list. I just haven't been able to get to any legacy events because I've got a lot of demands on my time, so I don't do as many events as I'd like to do. And most of the events I've been doing a bit at Warhammer World just for ease of transport and things like that. So what I'm hoping is from Facehammer GT, I get a flavour of where they sit, and I can sit and look through the PDFs, and I can go, right, I've got now an opinion on these. Then I'll update my tier list, and I can reflect on what I said and what is actually happening. And I think that's going to be really valuable. I do have an event on 20th of July in Swindon. There's some weird scenarios. It's not using this. It's not what I call it normal Warhammer. And I'm tempted to take Cafe to that, the list that I did on the list tech show, if I get my stuff and I can build it in time, because it doesn't need to be painted. The alternative is I take a Dwarf army, but I kind of want to take Dwarfs under this match play guide, because I think that's where they're going to shine. I still don't think they're going to be top tier, but I think maybe I put them too low, and maybe I put Wood Elves too high. I don't know, because and I'm really interested to see if I can get to another event and see these lists being run and see like good players with them and see how they're performing. And that tells you a little thing as well. Like when you know players are a certain level, if they're taking a certain list, that's because they're seeing value in it. My competitive play going forward, I probably think I'm going to stick with Chaos for a bit more. I still think they've got really good legs. I'm going to try the Cafe out and see how I get on with them. And that's purely more to understand the army in a bit more detail before I redesign my Chaos list. And I think that's probably where I'm leaning. I do have a high elf army that I could rebase. And I've got a greenskin army that I'm working on, which I think is going to be super good. I just haven't got that list honed yet. And I've got loads of dwarfs, so I can do like any dwarf army. I've literally got all Slayers, I've got everything. I've got everything you could go from the 4th edition book. All the Marauder models, everything, all in metals. So I've got a vast collection. So I could main dwarfs if I think they're competitive enough. I probably want to do that because I've always wanted to, and they've never really been there in every edition of Warhammer. They've never really got there, and that's why I'm still tentative on their power level. And I don't want to do gyrocopter spam. It's not my thing. It's like that's for games like Age of Sigmar. I'm not into that. And that's not Age of Sigmar bashing. I've just seen a lot more of that in that game. I'm just saying that's that style of game. I'm not being down on AOS. I'm just saying it's different. And that's not the game I want to play. Because that's where you get that gets fixed, and then you can't use that list, and you've bought a load of models, and I don't do 3D printing. So that's the other thing. Anyway, that's it for this show. Thank you very much for watching. I want to do a beginner series on how to play. So because I think there's a lot of new players coming to the game now that we've got all this out. And all people that were interested early on, dipped in, dipped out, probably going to dip back in now. So I want to do a series which helps people get into the game in a concise way without having to get the big tome and read it and get lost in the minutiae of all the rules, which are easy to miss. And I think really that's quite a difficult task to come up with a video format for that. So I need to spend a bit of time researching that. It's something that's been on my back burner that I've been thinking about for a while. Hopefully I can get something out which will help newer players, because I really want to make sure that the game's accessible, because the more people that play Old World, the better, in my opinion. So I want the scene to thrive, I want the game to thrive, and I want it to be supported for years to come. And really, it'd be awesome if it could become so big that it overtakes other games in the GW sphere of gaming. So it continues for many years, because honestly, I actually didn't realize how much I missed it. So now that it's back, I'm so happy. So let's go and push some square bases around. So I've got another game lined up for Saturday, doubles practice. So I've got my Burlock Damison Thunderalist coming out again, and they've been performing well. So hopefully it continues to do so. I really like the Flaming Burst Cannon Sapper. He's doing some work, heavy lifting. Yeah, not my opponents really like it too much, but that's that's fine. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you the next one. See you. Bye.